This is a particularly exciting article because it deals with the last days and the evidence that we may well be in the last days. Now, it has always been the case that the church has felt it's in the last days, and rightly so. Jesus always left us with the impression that every generation should feel that they are in the last days. But there are certain signs that we are seeing fulfilled in this generation which truly are the sorts of signs you'd expect for the last days, and they haven't been seen before. So firstly, as Daniel suggested, in the last days, we will be travelling backwards and forwards quickly, and there will indeed be an explosion of knowledge. This is something that we see. With modern transport and modern communications brought about by the printing press and then, of course, by the internet. The last days would also feature that the world would reach the fullness of the Gentiles, quite literally. We're now 8 billion people. We have practically filled the earth in a sustainable fashion. The last days would also be associated with great wealth. Jesus always indicated that in the last days there'll be eating and drinking. There'll be pleasures that could entice the saints. And certainly in the last 40 years, despite what you might see in the news, the overriding factor is that the nations of the world have become wealthy. Not everyone is wealthy, but the nations have become wealthy. In fact, as far as I'm aware, the United Nations targets for eradication of poverty were exceeded between 2010 and 2020. Such was the growth of the world's economy, driven partly by China and India, but many nations are developing quickly. The last days will see a despising of the church, and certainly we see that in the academic world. There has been an almost complete turnaround from when in the 16th, 17th and 18th century the church was highly regarded to now being utterly despised by the academic world. The last days will see scoffing in the academic world towards things like the flood, the creation and the second coming, just as 2 Peter chapter 3 said there would be. The last days will be a time when the gospel reaches every nation of the world. So despite the church being despised, the church has reached every nation in the world. That's only in the last 20 years. Nations like North Korea, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, some of the fastest growing churches can be found where the church is most persecuted. And that's another sign of the last days, the church's persecution. The government report of 2019 indicated that 80% of all religious persecutions against Christians. We are seeing a rapid increase in the persecution of Christians, particularly in places like India, where there hasn't been in the past persecution, there now is. The last days sees the restoration of Israel. That was always a sign of the last days, and that's what we've seen since 1948, and Israel's never been out of the news. We will definitely see the Lord return when the Jews say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." But the restoration of Israel prophesied in Ezekiel was the dry bones would come together first in their physical form. Then the breath has to be breathed into them that life may return. And so we see this two-stage restoration of Israel. Physically returned, yet to have the spiritual life breathed into it. That would definitely be a sign of the last days. And so we see a number of things that seem to indicate very clearly that we are in the last days. Signs that have never been fulfilled before, signs that were definitely and clearly spelled out in the Bible. And in all these things we can do what Jesus says. Look up, rejoice, for your redemption draws near. Thank you for listening.